The sermon title is No Shortcuts, and I think you'll find out why as we go along. I'm continuing the theme of faith that Rosanna started last week. I'm continuing on in Hebrews 11. She talked about Abraham. I'm talking about all the little guys that some of them are not very well known. And as I read the list of people, I wondered about some of them. Let's take a look. Moses. Moses' parents trusted God to protect their little baby. Moses grew up in the Pharaoh's palace, but as an adult he chose to follow with God's people. Moses fought for the Israelites' release from Pharaoh and from Egypt. He trusted God to mastermind the escape strategy and to stick with Moses and the children of Israel during 40 years in the wilderness. Joshua. After Moses died, Joshua became commander-in-chief of the Israelites going into the promised land. God's idea of attacking Jericho by marching, blowing trumpets, and shouting must have caused Joshua some angst. Yet he had seen God protect and provide for Israel during the 40 years in the wilderness. Rahab. The Israelite spies who were scouting out the promised land got their intel from Rahab the prostitute. Rahab took the risk to trust both the spies and their God. And she trusted that when her city was destroyed, the spies would keep their promise to save her family. Gideon. Gideon learned two things. First of all, that when God speaks, fleeces are not necessary. If you remember, he wanted to know for sure that God was going to be with him. And so he put out a fleece and said the fleece should be wet in the morning and the ground should be dry. And that still wasn't enough. And so he said the ground should be dry and the ground should be wet and the fleece should be dry. In the conquest against Midian, God told him to whittle down the troops from 32,000 to 300 men. Gideon had to trust that God wasn't going to set him up for a failure. He had to trust that trumpets and clay pots and torches could get the job done. It was Yahweh's victory, of course. Barak. Time and time again during the period of the Judges, Israel was conquered by the Canaanite nation. Deborah, one of the judges of Israel appointed by God, called Israel's military leader, Barak, to gather his forces and root out King Jabin's army. But Barak wouldn't go unless Deborah went with him. God has given you the victory, Deborah assured Barak, and together they battled and destroyed Canaan's entire army. Samson. Samson was a poor excuse for a judge of Israel. He had a vendetta against the Philistines, and yet he kept falling in love with Philistine women. He was reckless with his physical strength, and finally, he lost both his strength and his eyes over a haircut. In the end, he trusted that God would do the right thing through Samson's last-ditch effort against the Philistines. But this cloud of witnesses weren't perfect people. David defeated Goliath with a sling and stone, and he became a good king. In fact, the Bible uses him as a standard against which all the other kings were judged. Yet, if you remember the story, he blew it with Bathsheba. Rahab was a prostitute, and it was only after she chose faith in Yahweh that she is listed in the genealogical record of Jesus. Samuel was a good leader, but he couldn't rule his own household. Samson was unfocused, self-centered, and spoiled, a playboy with an uncontrollable temper. And Gideon, before God's call came to him, he was a Baal worshiper, and in spite of seeing God's power, he returned to Baal worship in the end. I wonder, if you were identifying people of faith, what would you use as criteria? I probably wouldn't put characters like Samson and Gideon on my list of heroes. Anna Deal notes that some of the heroes are simply people who experienced God doing miraculous things through them. God sometimes works through the unlikely and even disobedient, like Jonah, in order to get his divine agenda done. The lesson we can glean is that God's power and his approval are two separate concepts. Just because God works miracles through a particular human does not mean that human is commendable in his eyes, says Deal. Hebrews 11:33-38 says, it was through faith, and they have a long list here, they conquered kingdoms, administrated justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. All those things from this group of people. God was able to use each flawed hero to preserve his people, Emily Reynolds writes. It was their faith and perseverance and not their innate ability that enabled them to be used by God. It is those moments of faithfulness, not their moments of failure, the author of Hebrews remembers and uplifts. There's an old story about a tightrope walker who stretched a cable across Niagara Falls all the way from the American side to the Canadian side. And to the applause of growing crowds, the acrobat walked across the tightrope above the rushing, cascading waters that thundered below. Then he went back up and rode a bicycle across. And then he even walked blindfolded across. Finally, for his grand finale, he took a wheelbarrow and playing to the crowd, he said, "Do you think I can push this wheelbarrow across the Niagara Falls?" "Sure you can," came the thunderous response, to which he said, "Well, which of you is willing to ride in the wheelbarrow?" What does it take to win in the Olympics of faith? Let's compare it to what happens with an Olympic athlete. To compete in the Olympics is a big deal. It takes hard work and single focus. The truth is, Olympians give up a lot of freedom in order to follow a dream to be the best in their field. Their life involves 12,000 hours of dedicated practice a year, starting early in the morning. Diet and sleep are part of the schedule. It can mean moving away from home to find a coach in an Olympic training center. And it takes a team of supporters, family, fellow athletes, and coaches to keep them going when training gets tough. It can bankrupt a family to support a child's dream until they find sponsorships or scholarships. And to succeed, you had to want it so bad, you ate, slept, and breathed it. You had to dream about it at night, set goals, endure the pain, visualize success. The magic number to become great at something is about 10,000 hours. And to stay great means continuing the same grueling schedule for the rest of your life. There is no plan B. A life of great faith has similarities to the Olympic contestants. Faith isn't just a Sunday morning activity. Following God becomes a single focus. Where we live or how we serve may not be our first choice. God is our coach, Our Christian friends are our team. The church is the Olympic village where we support each other and learn to get along. Our spiritual coach helps us set goals and set our course. The competition tests our skills. And when things go wrong or we meet tough competition, we know God is in control and can get us back on track. Pierre de Coubertin says, if someone were to ask for the recipe of becoming Olympic, I would say that the first prerequisite is to be joyful. Watching the American women gymnastics this week, their sheer joy of competition and camaraderie has been inspiring. Joy is what people want to see in an Olympic faith. Listen again to the first words of Hebrews 12. Do you see what this means? All these pioneers who blazed the trail, all these veterans cheering us on, it means we'd better get on with it. Strip down, start running, and never quit. No extra spiritual fat, no parasitic sins. Keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race we're in. Study how he did it, because he never lost sight of where he was headed, that exhilarating finish in the end with God. He could put up with anything along the way, cross, shame, whatever. And now he's there in the place of honor, right alongside God. When you find yourself flagging in your faith, go over that story again, item by item, that long litany of hostility he plowed through. That will shoot adrenaline into your souls. Never quit. Hold on. When Lloyd Douglas, author of The Robe, attended college, he lived in a boarding house. A retired wheelchair-bound music professor resided on the first floor. Each morning, Douglas would stick his head in the door of the teacher's apartment and ask the question, well, what's the good news? The old man would pick up his tuning fork and tap it on the side of his wheelchair and say, that's middle C. It was middle C yesterday, it will be middle C tomorrow, and it will be middle C 1,000 years from now. The tenor upstairs sings flat. The piano across the hall is out of tune. But my friend, this is middle C. It's wonderful to know that in a changing world, there's something that is constant. We all need a middle C. Relationships change, health changes, jobs change, weather changes, governments change. But the good news is that Jesus does not change. Perseverance is the hardest part of our work of faith. There's a Norwegian proverb that says, a hero is one who knows how to hang on 1 minute longer. The author of Hebrews calls us to seek a deeper level of our faith, to push ourselves, to set goals. Faith is a distance run, and we need to pace ourselves, to not give up, and to run with all we have. The problem is, we're not much up for a long-distance run. We live in a world of instant gratification, instant communication. We like the anticipation and energy at the beginning of the race, but like the runner, we may find our faith sagging, our feet getting tired, and our breathing labored. It's hard to hang on 1 minute longer, but that's how we win the race. In our faith marathon, there are things that pull us back, like hurt or disappointments or disagreements or stress. The author of Hebrews says, lay aside the things that weigh you down. He gives us heroes of faith to inspire us and clouds of witnesses to cheer us on. And then he reminds us that Jesus has already pioneered the course. Jesus hung on and completed the race in spite of cross and shame. If we look to him, we can keep putting one foot in front of another, hanging on 1 minute longer. Let's do it. let's run the faith race.